So I'm Caroline or Kaz, and my pronouns are she, her. And I'm an emotional freedom technique practitioner. That's also sometimes known as EFT or tapping. So you might have heard it referred to as that. And in addition to that, I'm a health and energy coach and a yoga teacher. And then sort of the other sort of side of what I do is for sort of over 10 years until actually just this January, ran a support group for people coming out. So people sort of in a very transitional time of their life. And so I feel quite strongly about helping people to live more authentically. And so all the work I do kind of hopefully comes together to help people to really identify in themselves what they how they feel in themselves, and then be able to show that in the world in a way that then helps them to feel kind of healthier mentally and sort of physically.
So, what brought you into that kind of work? Would you say there was a turning point or a teacher or a moment that drew you to working with EFT and energy work?
Yeah, I think specifically with EFT, it was kind of random because, and I often think the universe kind of throws things at you when you need them. And with EFT, I was just on the web and I found this video, and it was someone doing this sort of EFT tapping, and I'd never heard of it before. And I could see, they sort of showed how it helped people to process difficult emotions. And at that point in my life, I was having a lot of difficult emotions. The video was quite funny. So I was like, oh, this is great. This is something that in some ways feels quite light, but at the same time is potentially going to give me something I really, really need. And so that's how I kind of got into EFT. And it was as soon as I started doing it, I started doing it on myself, and I really noticed the difference. And because it felt so huge to me, I then wanted to share it. And because I'm already a yoga teacher, I was already a yoga teacher at that time. I feel quite strongly about sort of I love helping people to relax and feel more, comfortable in their own skin. And this really seemed to be like a big piece of the puzzle for me. And so I wanted to share that as well.
And so, you're doing a workshop for us about using the EFT to help with overwhelm. And so, I was wondering, do you feel with the people that you work with in transitional periods and queer people, do you feel overwhelm is something that you see a lot in the queer community?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I think any population, any group of people who are additionally challenged. So, I mean, I think everybody, it's really normal to feel overwhelmed. All humans feel overwhelmed. It's a good thing in a way because it tells us that we need to slow down and take stock, maybe rest or reevaluate. But I think for queer people or people who've got additional challenges of any sort, our base level of sort of stress and experience is already, heightened. So then when life throws stuff at us, we may find ourselves becoming overwhelmed more quickly because we're already dealing with stuff, perhaps sometimes on the daily, dealing with challenges, external and internal. So I think overwhelm's a real biggie, and it's one that I find comes up a lot, and especially when people are making a big transition because it's huge and it's so outside of their everyday having to manage their lives.
And it's interesting because you said what drew you to EFT is like the lightness of EFT, and it can feel quite silly and quite playful. And so I wondered if that was something that you felt is a good remedy for overwhelm, and is that something that you like to offer people in response to stress and overwhelm?
Um, what I like about EFT is it deals with how you feel about things now. And so things may come up from your past, but it's kind of a way of sort of really owning where you are now. And then when you've sort of been able to acknowledge how you genuinely feel, sometimes it's not as scary as you think it is once you've actually allowed yourself to feel it. And then it does make room for kind of more lightness, in your life. It makes room for other things. It kind of unleashes the creative part in your brain that sort of says, okay, so if not that, what are the other possibilities? Like what else? What else could I do? And I think that is quite a playful, creative space to be in. I mean, it's you end up feeling the feels when you're doing EFT, so it's not all like a bag of laughs. But I think it does make room for like kind of lightness and more joy, more contentment, letting go of some of the things that weigh us down.
And if you could help people to feel one feeling, what would that feeling be? If you're working with people who are stressed or overwhelmed or uncertain, if there was one feeling that you could give to people, what would that be?
Well, I think it's hard to say one thing, but the things that are most important to me are making people feel like included and like they're normal, whatever they're going through. It's normal. We're all human. We have a whole myriad of stuff. Some of it's great, some of it's really not great, and it's all okay. So making people feel like they're part of something is really important to me, and it's all welcome. And I'm not just saying that lightly. It's not just lip service. The kind of the group that I ran for a decade, it was the absolute tenet that ran through it. Was people brought all their stuff, and it was a really precious space, and that's what I tried to help people feel that they're part of something. And then the other thing is I just really would love people to feel more joy, that sort of natural arising of joy and contentment. And actually my sort of my business name, I've just recently changed it, actually, has Come Home to Happiness, because I do think that we all have this innate capacity for joy underneath all the crap we may have experienced. And then sometimes, when people just hold space for us and help us to just get some of that stuff out in the open, the stuff that worries us, the stuff that makes us feel bad, sometimes underneath it all, there's some real contentment to be felt. And so, yeah, I'm all about that, really, just helping people feel included and more content in themselves and happy with who they are as a human.
That's really beautiful. And so, for your workshop that you're running for us in April, would you mind giving us a little workshop description of what people can expect?
Yes. So I've wrote this bit down, I've written it down. So what we're going to do is we're going to start with what tapping is. So for anyone who's never experienced it, just a little whirlwind tour of what it is and how to do it. And then what it can be used for, because I'm hoping that beyond the workshop, people will be able to, find some use for it. And then I want to do a little bit of sort of talk around some of the reasons that we sometimes feel overwhelmed, because often there's a pattern at play. And to give you an example of what that might be, it could be something like we're afraid to say no to people, or we're afraid to ask for help, or we're embarrassed or ashamed to, there can be lots of, I'll go more into it at the time, but there are lots of really normal, natural reasons why we can end up in a cycle of overwhelm, or even just one particular episode of overwhelm. So we'll address a little bit around the reasons. And then I want to do some group tapping. So we'll all do it together. And that will probably be really the majority of the workshop. And to start with, I'd like to do just some tapping on the symptoms. So I'd like to kind of invite people in the chat to sort of say if there's a particular thing that comes up for them around overwhelm. So it might be, I always go numb, or I start feeling really, really stressed and tense in my body. Like, people can volunteer or not, and we can all get benefits from each other's shares, or, even just thinking about our own without vocalizing them. That's also fine. So we'll do a little bit of tapping around the sort of symptoms that we feel, and then we'll do a little bit around some of the root causes. So if people are aware that there's certain behaviors that they do, maybe it feels really, they feel more worthy if they do lots of things for other people, but actually it's at the expense of their health and well-being themselves. So we'll talk a little bit about that, and we'll tap around that. And then finally, so EFT always addresses what the problem is, and in order to help to dissipate it. But then we can kind of move into the more positive, which is, okay, so now we've let go of some of that tension. What else could we think? Like, what would be some alternatives? And we'll tap around, what might be the potential other ways that we could feel around what we're experiencing. And hopefully leading to more positivity. Like, okay, so if not that, which I wasn't really enjoying, like, what else? Just opening the door, letting a bit of sunlight in and deciding like what might be next for me. And then right at the end, we'll do some questions, and if anybody wants to talk a bit more about overwhelm or tapping, And then beyond that, I'd like to sort of offer some resources. So if people want to kind of take it off and carry on their own, I'm hoping that they'll sort of have a little go at it themselves and, see where it takes them.
Thank you so much. We are so excited for the workshop.
Thank you. Thanks so much for having me.